Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to yet another episode of the Muscle Room Podcast. Of course, as always, I am here with the lovely Joseph Ryder behind the scenes. Of course. And again, Eric Potts unfortunately wasn't able to be here today. He's our other co-host. Unfortunately, he caught a flat tire. But in reality, he's actually a retired New Jersey officer. And when he heard Port Authority PBA was going to be here, he said he's not coming. so Eric, he gave himself a flat tire. Yeah, he slashed his own tire. So
it's understandable.
Yeah, unfortunately,
Port Authority probably had to go help him out.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, right. Port Authority bailing everybody out. So we are here with Bobby Egbert, the Port Authority PBA PIO, long history in law enforcement, and we're going to get into all of that very, very soon. Bobby, welcome to the Muscle Room Podcast.
Great to be here. I appreciate you having me. Thank you.
And of course, a huge shout out to the Nassau County Police Department for allowing us to host the episode here at their beautiful brand new academy and intelligence center. And it is, if I could say, phenomenal.
When I walked in here, I just couldn't believe it. I've never seen a law enforcement facility like this.
Yeah, it is truly beautiful. Just opened up, I think, a few months ago. I think they're still doing a little work here and there, but I had the ability to walk around a little bit, and it's gorgeous, and I'm sure the cops absolutely love it. So again, huge shout out to Patrick Ryder, who we'll be interviewing actually later today as well, the commissioner for Nassau County Police Department. So Bobby, let's jump right into it. Tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got into law enforcement, and let's go through your career.
Well, I'm retired now. Retired 10 years. Retired in 2013, January 2013. I was a Port Authority police officer for 27 years. Majority of that time, I was also a PBA rep. I was a delegate, a trustee, and chairman of the trustees. I came to law enforcement a little bit later in life. I was 34 years old when I joined the Port Authority PD. I was in the financial industry prior to that. And it came to the point where I guess I was a little bit burnt out, and I wanted to do something that I thought would be more important to what I was doing. And I was fortunate enough, Port Authority PD was the only test I took. Competed with like about 50,000 other people.
Everybody wants the Port Authority job.
And you didn't realize it at the time until you showed up at the tests and you said, my God, this is, how ridiculous, and, Port Authority PD was a bit smaller back then, probably about the half the size it is now. But when you have 50,000 people show up for a test, you realize, no way this is going to happen. Fortunately, I made it through everything. Never knew anybody on the, nothing whatsoever. My list numbers came out high, and I got a letter saying I was being appointed to the academy, so I went.
We call it the golden ticket.
Golden ticket.
For those of you who are listening in law enforcement, if you're Nassau, Suffolk, NYPD, essentially any agency in the New York metropolitan area, when you hear that you got on the job with Port Authority, they call it the golden ticket.
Well, there's another side to that too, though.
I'm sure Austin,
there is. Because you've heard this comment also. Once you get on the job, you get through the academy, and you remember how it was. Oh, you're happy every day you go to work. You can't wait to get to work. But you kept hearing senior guys talk about the 20-year nightmare. And it didn't take long. It didn't take long to realize, no one really cares about you on this job. Most of important, not even your own agency.
Yeah.
I always told my cops, you always remember, if you buy it on your post today, God forbid, yeah, they're going to give you a nice funeral. No question about that. But what's going to be on your post tomorrow doing the same thing? Another blue suit.
Yeah.
The pieces are interchangeable.
Yeah, and we'll get into that, I think, towards the end of the podcast, because that's a problem, not just with Port Authority. That's a problem with every agency throughout the entire country. And that's part of the issue as to why the manpower is so low throughout the United States. And, of course, there's many other reasons, especially with everything that's been going on in the past few years. But we'll get into that aspect of law enforcement in just a few minutes. Before we continue, we also have a lot of listeners who are viewing from across the country and even other parts of the world. Explain to them, to the best that you can, what the actual Port Authority is. Because it's confusing, even to those of us in New York. Many of us don't fully comprehend what it is, what it does, and how the Port Authority Police Department operates. So if you can kind of just get into that a little bit.
Well, the Port Authority Police Department is the law enforcement arm of the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey. It's a bi-state agency, and basically it's a transportation agency. If you want something built, Port Authority will do it. It's great. Builds airports, rail systems, seaports, everything. These facilities need policing. So when the Port Authority was formed, and it was actually formed almost 100 years ago through a bi-state compact, the Port Authority PD was formed. The Port Authority PD is unique in the sense that police officers get their authority from the state. Port Authority police officers get their authority from two states, New Jersey and New York. It doesn't matter which one you work in, you're sworn in both states. So it is unique in law enforcement. I'm sure there are some other departments that have that bi-state jurisdiction.
I think MTA does it too with Connecticut,
New York,
right?
Connecticut, yeah.
Yeah, I think they're a little bit different though. They don't have sworn status, but I don't know. I shouldn't even speak of that. Port Authority PD is the largest transportation-related police department in the country. Currently is probably about 2,500 members, and it patrols the most terror-targeted sites in the New York metropolitan region, and we've paid the price for that too. So but it's a great police department. But it goes, I always say, they don't make movies about the PAPD. They make movies about the NYPD and the LAPD, but that's okay because we work with what I call a quiet confidence. We know what we're doing and we do the job well.
I have to give credit to where credit is due. Of course, as all of our listeners know, Joe and I and many others from the podcast are part of Law Enforcement Officers Weekend, which is the national 501c3 nonprofit. We've been around since 2017. And since our inaugural year, we've worked with many agencies across the United States. Port Authority, hands down, is by far the best organization that we work with. Anytime we ask for something from the Port Authority, whether it be the PBA or the department themselves, we've never been told no. They always bend over backwards for what we do. Whether it's meeting families of fallen officers at the airports and escorting them off the flights, or participating in escorts as we do our motorcycle rides, or giving us facility usage for whatever it may be, it's always a yes. One year, I think it might have been the first or second year, when we were working with the Port Authority down at the Trade Center, there was a lieutenant. I won't name who it was, but one of the lieutenants who we could work closely with. And I brought the same thing to his attention. I said, the Port Authority, by far, hands down, best organization we work with. And he goes, you want to know why? And I go, why? He goes, because we are always overshadowed by the NYPD. He goes, everyone always knows the NYPD, every single movie, every book, television show, of course, NYPD. Nobody knows about the Port Authority. So when we have the opportunity to showcase what we do and what we can do, we're going to take that opportunity. And he was 100% right. And the Port Authority, again, hands down, by far the best. So shout out to Port Authority, shout out to your superintendent and, all the chiefs and the higher ups that allow us to do it in the first place. And a huge shout out to the PBA. And we're going to get into that in a moment. But again, the PBA from Port Authority has supported us both financially and physically every time we've asked for help. And you guys are just amazing people.
Well, I appreciate you saying that. Another reason for that is the Port Authority PD was decimated on September 11th. We lost 37 cops that day. Whenever I speak with people, I talk about the first responders that were lost that day. And you can't speak about them without obviously talking about that unimaginable number of 343 New York City firefighters. But we were the smallest agency, but we were the first of the first responders because we had a precinct and always had a precinct right at the World Trade Center. 37 officers out of a department that time that numbered probably 1,100 is quite a bit.
Significant number.
The response from the nation, from the populace, from other law enforcement agencies, other first responders, to the needs of not only the Port Authority, the NYPD, the FDNY, was overwhelming. We have never forgotten that. And when I say we, I'm talking about the Port Authority PBA. I'm not in a position to speak for the department. And we have made it our mission to pay back whenever we can. Give you an example. Currently, right now, it's the 10-year anniversary of the Boston Marathon
Today.
bombing. Yes.
Yeah.
Our Special Services Cantina is up there in Boston.
Fantastic.
Providing relief spots for the first responders up there. And we've been up there every year since the Boston bombing for that. As a matter of fact, in the aftermath of the Boston bombing, we went right up there to assist and help. And we were in Watertown when all the shooting and the two suspects, the one was captured, one was killed. But we'll never forget the help we received afterwards. And I think that has a lot to do with how we respond. And though I can't speak for the department, I know at the higher levels, they feel the same way.
Yeah. I mean, it's pretty obvious. Again, everything that we've done, it's always a yes. And I know it's not just our organization. It's many, many other organizations that are out there that are doing really great things. And the Port Authority is always a yes person, yes man. And I think you're 100% correct. I think we kind of saw the same thing. I was a volunteer firefighter for the City of Long Beach Fire Department. And after Hurricane Sandy, all the help that we got that came down for the weeks and months afterwards, we always were so grateful for that help that we always said, if there's ever another emergency, we want to be the ones to help others. And we did for many, many years. Hurricanes were hitting across the country. There was a massive one in Texas. There was a big one, I think, down in the Carolinas. And we raised tens of thousands of dollars and we sent truckloads down there. We had firefighters that went down to help out. So I know exactly what you're talking about. And I could only imagine what it was like being a police officer, whether, with the PBA or the department, and being stuck in a hellhole of 9/11. And then all of the support that came from across the country for those months or really years, and all the support that you continue to get day in and day out, being able to express and help other companies or organizations or departments. I mean, it shows 100%.
You mentioned Superstorm Sandy. I'm reminded during that, and we have commands in just about every borough in New York. But the initial first responders, certainly the NYPD and the FDNY, we had chiefs, including our chief of department, walking the streets day after day in Staten Island, helping the residents. What do you need? And then getting our assets there to help them.
Mm-hmm.
And again, that's all part of payback. All right. You helped us. We're here to help you.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic.
Right.
So, Bobby, let's get a little bit more into your career and how you became a PIO for the PBA, because that's pretty interesting. So, what year did you actually get on the job with Port Authority?
1986.
So you go from 86 and you retired in
2013.
2013. So you did about a 27.
Almost 27 years. It was 26 and 9 months.
So almost like 27, right? Yeah. So 27 years in law enforcement. Right. You were a union delegate,
trustee, and then chairman of the trustees.
For how long of your career? For
more than half of it.
Wow. Yeah. So it's a long time. So just real quick, can you explain what the PBA does? Because again, a lot of our listeners, they don't have PBAs in their departments. They're part of the FOP. So if you can just kind of explain what the PBA does and what you do for the cops.
Well, number one, we're the bargaining unit, where the PBA represents the rank of police officer in the Port Authority PD. Currently, I think it's probably 1,800 members. Rank of police officer. They're the ones that do the work. Mm-hmm. So, it's the collective bargaining aspect. It's negotiating with the agency to get successor agreements in place. But that's not the only thing a union has to do. You have to represent your members with providing certain benefits for them and representation. Sometimes cops need representation on disciplinary matters. When I was working, I used to say the job hands out 10-day rips. Rips would be a suspension. A 10-day rip might be depending on the cop, a $4,000 to $5,000 penalty. I used to say you can commit homicide in the city and not be fined that much money, and this is for a minor infraction.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, the PBA is also the one who has to come to your defense for that in any hearing, trial board for minor and sometimes major discipline too.
Mm-hmm.
That's an issue. So it's a full representation of the membership, their needs, their family needs. Then there's the work rules that are involved. The contract, our contract is almost like the size of a phone book. And the agency uses that when they argue about overtime costs and everything. Let's face it, overtime, it's because you just don't have enough cops. All right, that's an agency decision. That's a business tool that they use. They've said many times it's cheaper to pay overtime than to pay for new additional cops. But work rules are part of the contract. The contract is a bilateral agreement, not a unilateral agreement. So I always reminded the Port Authority, and in my job as the PIO, I remind the media, everything in that contract is also the will of the Port Authority. No one held a gun to their head. And when I talk about this, I'm talking about all contracts, other agencies, anything. Contracts are bilateral. So it's the representation of our members and making sure they and their families are treated fairly.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I'm going to say the right thing here. The PBA probably deals with politics more than anything else. Am I right by saying that?
Yeah, absolutely.
So for the most part, right, probably 99% of all law enforcement, fire department, EMS agencies across the United States deal with just their little union and their county or city or state. Port Authority, on the other hand, is dealing with 2 states, multiple counties, multiple jurisdictions. How do you deal with that? How do you even start?
Well, it's a delicate balance. And yes, you can't escape the political aspect that any organization has to deal with, particularly a public organization. Now, for example, if I can use your job, the NYPD, the New York City PBA has to deal with the city council and the mayor and his crew. And that's the way things normally go through. If anything you want to push forward, anything you want to progress on, whether it be a contract, work rules, even as simple as uniforms and equipment. Within the Port Authority, the PBA has to deal with very similar aspects. We have a chairman of the commissioner of the Port Authorities. That's the top civilian. The executive director, the board of commissioners. So that's equal to your mayor and council and things like that. Once they approve everything, then it has to go to the governor of New York and the governor of New Jersey. And sometimes they're totally opposite. Different political parties. Doesn't happen that often in New York and New Jersey, but we have to learn how to deal with both sides of the river, if I can put it that way.
Right.
And they're completely different entities. They're the way they look at things are different. A governor has to do what's best for the people of his state. And that may not be the same as the governor in the other state. So you have to learn how to balance that. We have a robust legal staff, and that gets involved in that. But the leadership of the PBA they have to be very astute when it comes to that.
Yeah.
And it's very important to move things along. And sometimes it takes a while.
I'm sure it does. Now, you started in 1986. At what point did you, I know prior to us going on the air, you told us that you had a background in journalism, which is how you kind of walked yourself into the realm of being a PIO, which for those who don't know, it's a public information officer. What year did you start actually working with the media on the PBA side?
Oh boy. Well, when you said I have background in journalism, my degree is in journalism, and my work experience was for a split second. So so I can say for a split second I was a journalist. But it's something, your training and education never really leaves you. I always felt that people needed to know the good work Port Authority cops do each day in New York and New Jersey. The agency has a media relations department, and their main focus is the operations of the Port Authority. It's running their facilities. It's the building, the engineering. If you want to know about Port Authority bond offerings and things like that, they can answer all those questions. They were not really up to par on the police issues. And there was a time when they really never had anybody assigned to the police issues. And that caused a lot of frustration in the local media, New York and New Jersey. So I guess it was it had to be the late 90s. And then certainly after September 11th.
So that's what I was getting at. I wanted to see were you the PIO during the September 11th attacks?
No, I didn't become the official PIO until I retired. Mm-hmm. The work I did before that was that gray area.
Yeah, wearing multiple hats essentially for the PBA.
Yes. I remember we would set up interviews with local TV reporters, and the president at the time of the union was our longest serving president, Gus Denise, who's passed. And he would show up in the office, and we'd have a news crew in there, and he had no idea what was going on, and rightfully so. He'd be pissed off. I mean, he's the president, but we would inform him of this issue, that issue. And it was something he was certainly in line with. And he would sit down for the interview. So, we were doing things like that, almost guerrilla tactics, even within our own organization. But we needed to get this stuff out there. We needed the public to know what we did. We needed to know where the agency was failing when it came to public safety, what we thought. And the majority of the work we did resulted in good things happening, corrections, better response. And we see that in other agencies too. It's usually the unions that bring these things forward. And so they, I kept doing that work. It wasn't part of my elected responsibilities, but I kept doing that. I developed the contacts with the media simply by just calling, and introducing myself. A reporter will always talk with you, especially if you're from law enforcement. And
what type of stories were you trying to push out in particular to the?
Well, a lot of them had to do with lack of policing of certain aspects of the Port Authority. Now, for example, they built this rail system at John F. Kennedy Airport called the Air Train, and it runs out to Jamaica Station and all that, and it was not policed. Well, we always, remember, the Port Authority PD has always been terror target focused. 1975, LaGuardia Airport, bomb blew up in the Central Terminal building. Killed, I think, 11 people. Horribly wounded numbers of others. During my time, there was a bomb exploded at the old Pan Am building terminal at LaGuardia, at Kennedy Airport. Obviously, the 93 bombing of the World Trade Center, and obviously 9/11. we were the union was very serious about this. And we viewed the air train as certainly necessary. We needed that. The region needed it, no question about it. The air train at one point actually went into Terminal 4 and actually stopped right below the El Al section. We just viewed it as a bomb delivery system, and so, we brought that forward. This is an unpoliced system, transportation system. And we arranged for reporters to ride the trains and film things. And that we were successful in getting that changed, making that a patrolled, train, just like our path system, train patrol and things like that. Mm-hmm. And I think, a uniform is a deterrent. There's no question about it. And not just to the things I'm talking about, terrorism, to any type of crime.
Right.
All right. And how do we know it? Because when these spots aren't covered, crime does happen. And then we bring that out. So a lot of people say it's self-serving. It's because we just want to keep the work and all that. Yeah, that's one of the things the union does to protect the work of its members. But a law enforcement union is different than other unions. So we understand the seriousness of what we do.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I want to kind of circle back to what you said just a few minutes ago, that the Port Authority is the most terror-targeted agency, right, in the world, or well, country, we'll say.
In the country,
in
I
the
would
country.
say, yeah.
Multiple terror attacks since, we'll say, 75, since you started. 4 that we could name off the top of our head. 2 major ones being the 93 bombing, and then, of course, September 11th. When you look at September 11th in the grand scheme of things, right, if you're looking from the 50,000-foot view, everyone says that, well, New York City in particular was attacked. But if you start looking at it more individualized, it's really that the entire complex of the Port Authority in Lower Manhattan, which was the Trade Center complex, was attacked. And that in particular is Port Authority. How does it make the Port Authority, in particular the PBA, operate, knowing that they're the number one terror target in the United States? How do you, as the PIO, handle that, day to day, that it could happen again? How does that, how do you train for that? How do you prepare something like that?
Well, I was a first responder on September 11th. It's a counselor explained to me once. I said, I don't understand these people who want to take ownership, the closeness of it, and you know what I'm talking about. I said, I want to get as far away as I can from it. And this counselor told me, well, unfortunately, it happened to you. It's never going to leave you, and you have to accept that. Mm-hmm. Probably the best gift I ever got out of 9/11, the gift of acceptance. All right. I was there. I saw what happened, survived that day. We'll never forget that. I've always felt guilty. I'm getting a little bit off here, but I remember after the second building came down, I knew right away. Every Port Authority cop knew it was terrorists before they even got on scene. Because that was we know we went out every day on patrol with a target on our back. Even though the radio reports, the media reports were talking about other things, they weren't really talking about terror. Every Port Authority cop knew what it was. So when the second tower came down, I was on West Street right at that site, and I knew we were going to war. And it's probably going to involve my children. And 2 of my sons went in the military, a Marine, and my oldest son, who's actually a Green Beret, went in. I've always felt guilty about that because of the career path I chose. It affected them. Because 9/11, and I think for anyone who was involved, 9/11 runs through your family now. Mm-hmm. You can't get rid of it. My my youngest son, Marine, for 8 years, was wounded in Afghanistan. He's fine today. But I've always felt like I had something to do with that, because if I hadn't chose the career that I chose, it wouldn't have evolved them, and they wouldn't have been exposed to these horrors that they went through. One thing the Port Authority PBA will not let happen is let the agency forget what happened. And so we have to be a voice for that all the time. We have to let them know that if their patrol plan is something we can't agree with, we don't run the police department, but we do have things to say. All right, and we say, well, remember this, remember that. We don't think that this is appropriate. This is and normally that doesn't happen. The difficulty with police departments, they're labor intensive, as you know, and there's never enough labor. So what does that mean? It means you go down spots that should be covered are not covered. I'm sure you see it on your job, and that sends chills through union leadership, because you know what can happen. Now, September 11th was not a Port Authority problem, was not a New York City problem. It was the incredible failure of American intelligence. We know that. All right. The aftermath, though, should be our responsibility now, to keep it from happening again. And it's been 21 years, 22 years now. Nothing's happened. Again, I go back to my two sons. The military I was in, which was during Vietnam, was not a good military. Everybody that was in the military didn't want to be there. You were either drafted or you were in another branch because you didn't want to get drafted, and you were fortunate enough to get in another branch. It was not a good military. The military we have today, when I used to go visit my sons at their different postings, when I see these young men and women, and I see the steely reserve in their eyes, they're doing what they want to do. This is all a result of our country being attacked. I hope that stays with us. I hope our police departments and law enforcement agencies keep that, remain proactive, remain committed to what they say they do, protect the public. But protecting the public in a police department, there's that financial balance too, and that's the big elephant in the room, is can they afford to do this? So the union has to remind them, say, hey, no, you need guys there, you need them, you need police officers there, you need something there. So
speaking of it,
I have a quick question. So in New York City, a big emphasis is paid on the responders to 9/11 and the health effects that they're facing currently. How has the PBA for Port Authority addressed the health needs of your members who were at 9/11, who were on Ground Zero? And how are your members doing 20 plus years out? The NYPD has lost triple, quadruple the number of officers that we lost on 9/11. How is the Port Authority handling this with your membership?
The PBA is very active in that. We've certainly lost a lot of members through cancers and things like that. Matter of fact, we just one of them is going on the wall this year down in the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial Wall. I forgot the exact number, how many are on there, but I don't think we're yet at 37 to match the number, but we're getting pretty close to that. And these are, have been classified as 9/11 illnesses. The PBA, once we become aware of a person suffering, we make sure all their paperwork is done. We make sure everything that needs to be set up. We assist their family in every way, just in case the worst happens. So we're very proactive when it comes to that. We encourage people to be part of the monitoring and testing programs. But other than that, you can't really do much more. You can't, a PBA, a union can't demand its members do certain things when it comes to their personal health or this or that. The Port Authority's Office of Medical Services monitors these things also, but it's the PBA is mostly involved in assisting the families, making sure everything is filed, making sure all the I's are dotted, the T's are crossed, so the family doesn't have any issues going forward with the medical care, in many cases the end of life care and the benefits to that family if the person passes on.
I have one final question for you before we get towards the end of this show, and it's a heated topic, and it deals with conspiracy theories. This is a question that I brought up a few months ago. We interviewed Will Jimeno and Scott Strauss and some of the heroes from 9/11, and we also spoke with the staff at the museum. And we were doing actually a live stream on my TikTok account. And I can't tell you how many flooded questions we had. In particular, people are trolls, and they ask these questions on purpose to try to bring out the worst in people. And then there's also people out there who are true conspiracy theorists who really believe that X, Y, and Z happened when really it was A, B, and C. How does the Port Authority PBA, especially as a PIO, how do you deal with those who consistently say that 9/11 was an inside job and that the government knew that this was going to happen and they let it happen and all these people died because of whatever? They wanted Iraqi oil or whatever it was, right? We all know that that's bullshit, right? But I could only assume that you guys must get bombarded with these types of questions and comments consistently on your social media pages. And how do you deal with that?
I also, unfortunately, had the social media dumped on me. In addition to dealing with the media, and I don't have any personal social media accounts, so that was a learning curve for me. But I recognize today the benefit of it. They're certainly, ours are public platforms. There's no such thing as friends or this or that. They're great platforms for getting the message out. And we do have a far reach. Every once in a while, I have to review comments and things like that. Very rarely, we don't censor anything. If a person has a legitimate thing to say about law enforcement, about the Port Authority, PD, this or that, got to let it go. All right? Not going to censor that. Sometimes people it has to be censored. It's either racist or vulgar or something like that. I don't answer any of those things. All right. When I've had discussions with reporters and media about things like that, I say, listen, I don't know anything about conspiracies. I'm not a conspiracy theory guy. I know what happened. I was there. I've been to many funerals. I see the two buildings that were there are no longer there. I deal with it in real time. I don't know the politics behind it. I don't know. Listen, there are still conspiracies about Pearl Harbor. Okay. And that was 70 some odd years ago, more than that. This will happen no matter what. If Mary's child down the street got hit by a car, God forbid, there's going to be conspiracies about that. It's deal with what is in front of you. And that's what a cop has to do. You deal with what's in front of you. All right. And then try to make the area safe. I'm not concerned with that other than I think it's nonsense. But then again, people can think what they want to think.
Yeah.
You know, and but it's nothing that I deal with.
Right.
I find it to be insulting.
Yeah.
That's not the issue. The issue is 2,900 some odd people are dead.
Mm-hmm.
The social fabrics of these communities are forever altered. The Little League coach is gone. The pastor is gone. You know, the volunteer firefighter is gone. That's the issue here.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a great response.
Yeah.
Deal with what you have in front of you.
Yeah.
Don't worry about the other bullshit, the outside bullshit.
Yeah.
Deal with what you know and let everything else just play out as it is. Don't get involved.
Yep.
It's a great way to put it. And I'm sure there's plenty of other, cops and firefighters that are also PIOs for their departments, and they're listening to this right now. So I guess if that's kind of the takeaway is just deal what you have in front of you.
Oh, that's it. It's one of the things that helps a union PIO in law enforcement and any first responder agency, I can get to the person on the scene. All right. But one thing I try to tell the media is, I can get to the person on the scene. And that person is focused on what's right in front of him. Even if it's a simple car accident or something like that, you got one cop that's focused on this. You got another cop that's focused on this. You got another cop that's focused on this. And it's like any other scenario. You whisper something in the ear of person number one, and by the time it gets to 10, it's totally different. Well, when I'm dealing with 3 or 4 cops on the same scene, they're all dealing with something different. So they all see different things. All right. And the person that's dealing with the people in the car, trying to get them out, that's what that person is concentrating. He has no idea what's going on around him. The other cops know that. So it's very compartmentalized.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure your experience has been that too. You go on a scene and maybe it's your job. So, you're there, you're the one who has to do the paperwork on it, and you're getting this and getting that. But there's a lot of things you're not even aware of because you're focused on this. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
But that's your job. That's your job. All right. And then you have to go to your brother and sister offices and get other information so you can, do your narrative.
Right.
And so it's one of the things I want to get into is being a PIO for a law enforcement union. Is I've had to remind just about every reporter, news outlet that I've dealt with that they honestly believe there's only 2 police departments in the country, the NYPD and the LAPD. None of the others, not even Chicago, registers for them. And I have to remind them and say, well, hold on a minute. There are approximately 18,000 police departments in this country. Everyone is doing the same job. They're basically all trained the same. Okay? It's you have to widen your scope to realize, police departments take care of an area. They don't take care of the whole country.
Right.
All right. So that was one of the things I had to overcome, and I just had to be open about that with the reporters I dealt with, and they've all said, I never thought of that.
I think that kind of even goes back to if there's an incident, let's say in Ferguson, an incident that has nothing to do with New York City or any other part of the country, but because it's one police officer who made a bad choice, all right? Or let's say in Minnesota, let's say as a better example of a bad choice being made. Every single police officer, every single city, county, town is now dealing with the outcome of that one specific incident, right? And I think that kind of brings to your point that we're all trained the same. We're all on the same team per se, right? The thin blue line. We're all affected by one or the other, but we're all also individuals, right? And every department is an individual, and we all have different command staff, and we have different populations that we serve. And the Port Authority is really, honestly, it's the same, but also very different than really any other agency, because of the population you're serving is mostly transient.
Oh yeah, yeah. The average commuter coming into New York City each day, the chances of them dealing with a Port Authority cop are far greater than them dealing with a New York City cop.
Right.
They see us every day. We're the face of the Port Authority.
Mhm.
I wish the agency would understand that, but we're the face of the Port Authority, whether that be good or bad.
Right.
All right, because
I believe it's good.
Yeah, yeah, but the you talk about agencies throughout the country. Like when I worked in Manhattan at the Port Authority bus terminal, that was in the 80s and early 90s. When I got in trouble, within a few seconds, I had 25 cops up my back. All right. They always talk about urban policing being, the most dangerous. It's a numbers game. To me, it's the cop in Podunk, Iowa, who's by himself and is covering how many square miles. That's in the most danger.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
All right. And people don't realize that, and reporters don't realize that, because they make movies about the NYPD and about the LAPD. They don't make movies about Podunk, Iowa.
Mhm.
But that cop he's got to be on by himself. Got to be on the ball all the time. Just policing transportation facilities. I have a son out that lives in LA. Whenever I go out there, you never see a foot cop. And I have friends that are on the LAPD. They tell you, we have no foot posts whatsoever in the whole city. Now, you go to Midtown Manhattan, you can't go 2 feet without tripping over a cop. It gets a little bit more exaggerated when you do transportation policing, because you're constantly surrounded by thousands of people, and things explode around you. And that's when we were talking before, I spoke about confrontational policing. There are times when you have to confront these things. It's not a radio job. It just explodes in front of you because you're constantly surrounded and you're by yourself. It's one thing about Port Authority, we don't work in partners. All right. You're by yourself. If you're assigned to, say, a terminal at Kennedy Airport, thousands of people in that terminal, so many things going on, and you're the only cop there. That's it. That's your beat. You have bars, you have restaurants, you have thousands of people, you have domestic incidents going on. You have, unfortunately, you have, injuries, you have deaths, you're the only cop. That's it. You get back up right away, of course, but you have to be, it's a different way of policing. It's a totally different way of policing.
Yeah, you're the sheriff of your little community.
You're always
just you.
That's it. You're the sheriff, and at an airline, an airport, each terminal is a community unto itself. Mm-hmm. It has a downtown area. It has the bars. It has this. You got to clear out bars. You got bar fights. You got this. You got that. You got drunks.
And different flights coming in from different parts of the world too.
You know how many people die on airplanes?
Oh, that's actually how many people die on airplanes.
It's not an unusual thing. And I remember toward the latter part of my career, I was working on the inside, and the office I worked in the emergency garage in the command I worked in, one right next to a bay that's where they used to put the bodies waiting for the ME, yeah. and then you have to eat your dinner, and you got to deal, and you got this decaying body next to you, and you always knew when there's something in there because it just morphed into where you were.
Every cop knows that. Every cop knows that smell. Yeah. Yet you're hungry, so you're next to a dead body, and listen, you got to do what you got to do. You got to eat.
It's the smell of death.
You just get used to it. You just get used to it.
Yeah, I remember. I write for American Police Beat, and I'm always writing about these little nuance things, which I find very interesting. And to give you an example, I wrote, being a foot cop, I wrote a story called Keys. A lot of people say, "What do you mean keys?" Well, it's the sound of the keys on the duty belt of the cops running to your aid. All right. And when I worked in Manhattan, every cop knew the sound of keys. Now, Now that's a very nuanced thing to write about. So you got to, but I wrote a whole story about that. And then I also wrote, and you're going to understand this, an article which is going to be actually in May's Police Beat, called Safety Pin. It's about a New York City style police badge. We don't have a hinged pin. It's a safety pin, the same as your mother used to. You diaper, women, and such a nuanced thing. But I wrote a whole story about it. And I started this story about happening in Police Week in 2002. I was walking through a lobby. I was an escort for one of our 37's families for the national service. And I'm walking through a hotel lobby, and I'm in my Class A's. And a gathering of LA cops stopped me because they're intrigued by the New York City type uniform. And I got to admit, I was intrigued by theirs because, that's what you see on television all the time. They're form-fitting, uniforms and all that. And then one of them said, "Where's the safety pin?" And I said, "Oh, okay." So I flipped open my blouse, and I even had to explain that to them. Well, that's what we call it, a blouse. And they say, "Oh my God!" And they looked at it and they said, "That's safety pin." So I wrote a whole story about the safety pin and how it never leaves you, and it's the attachment,
right?
And then I ended the story by saying, the woman I was escorting, they never found her husband's body. What they did find was his shield with the safety pin still attached.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So burned through, unfortunately, everything else but the safety pin.
Now, New York City area cop would know the safety pin.
Yeah.
No one else in the country would. So I wrote it, and it's, being a national publication, but here, LA cops, they wanted to see the safety pin.
Right. Yeah, it's fascinating.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So we're getting towards the end of the podcast. The last thing that we always ask our guests to do is to bring an item with them that they want to display to our viewers. And then we're going to discuss it briefly, and then we're going to add it to our collection of what will once or soon to hopefully be our living museum. So what did you bring for us?
I didn't know what to bring. I retired 10 years ago, so I don't even know where any of my stuff is anymore. But what I brought was this folder that explains the Port Authority police patches. We have two patches, a different one on each sleeve. One is the traditional patch. Okay, Port Authority Police, New York and New Jersey. And then the other one is what we call our memorial patch, and that's as a result of September 11th. And as you see on there, we have the facsimile of the World Trade Center with the flag flying over it. Number 37 at the bottom of the towers, that represents the 37 Port Authority cops killed, and the date 9/11/01. So the Port Authority packages these in a folder. Port Authority Police, you open it up, has the two patches in there. And then it also explains the color scheme, the significance of the colors, the significance on the memorial patch and the regular patch. The reason I have these, as the PIO, I get a lot of requests for these, as the department does too. And whenever I need more, I just contact Special Services, and they're more than happy to send me any supply I need. And we will always send these out to people. So I figured this might be a nice thing to bring you.
I think so. I think it's a great thing.
I would like to sign it for you.
Absolutely.
And so if I had a pen, which I don't, I'm a good PIO.
we'll get a pen before you leave here, and you'll sign that for us.
Very well. But I thought this would be appropriate.
That's fantastic. And I'm gonna take out. This is. I'm not saying this because you're here. This is truly my. Well, I guess I'll say my second favorite patch, one being, of course, the NYPD patch, my own. This is my second favorite patch out of any patch that I've ever seen in law enforcement. And I've seen some really cool ones. But this patch in particular, with the Trade Center in the background, or Trade Centers in the background, and the American flag, and of course, number 37, it just means so much, especially to all of us here in the New York City metropolitan area, that I think it's just such a cool, badass representation of all the lives that we lost that day. And as a memory to why we still do what we do. And honestly, the reason I even became a cop in the first place, 9/11 had such a huge impact. I was only in 6th grade when it happened. And I became a volunteer firefighter and then an EMT and then eventually a police officer. And a lot of it is because of 9/11 and what I witnessed firsthand. So, truly, truly love this patch. And what we're going to have you do now is, there you go, if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure.
Give me a little signature.
The other thing I forgot to mention is there's a story of the PAPD on the back.
Oh, fantastic.
Too. So I got to say the department did a great job.
Yeah, I agree.
So I'm going to sign this. I'm just going to sign my name and hold on a minute.
And we're going to sell this on eBay.
That's it.
And you can also put today's date as well if you want.
I am.
Awesome. And while you do that, again, a huge, huge shout out to the Port Authority PBA, the Port Authority Police Department, Frank Conti, president of the PBA, who is a good friend of ours. And hopefully we'll be seeing him soon as well. We'd love to get him on the podcast. So if you could let him know that we'd love to have him on. And I think we're going to be visiting the Port Authority again in July. In the end of July, we're going to be flying in 5 families of officers that were seriously injured in the line of duty. I think we're going to give them a tour of the Trade Center and the 9/11 Museum. So we always get Port Authority involved when we do that. Plus, of course, when we fly them to JFK, they always are there to help out.
What's today's date?
Today's the 16th? 17th. 4/17. Fantastic. All right, Bobby. Thank you so much for coming on.
Hey, thanks so much for
I
having
hope you
me.
enjoyed it.
I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Any last words?
Yeah, I just, we're the good guys. No matter what anybody says, we're the good guys. I write stories for American Police Beat. In some of the stories, when I have to get into this, the climate of the anti-police climate, I usually say something like, law enforcement officials throughout the country are scratching their heads saying, what the hell are they talking about? There is such a misconception of who police officers are and what their job is. We're no different than anybody else. We have families, we have fears, we have anxieties. We have, I used to show up on a scene of people in distress, and they see me, and right away they think everything's better. They didn't realize that I'm shaking inside. Mm-hmm. All right, like I got to handle this. And you try to do the best you can, and to paint us all with the broad brush, because someone, an officer somewhere did something wrong, or is perceived, and most of the time it's perceived to have done something wrong. It affects all of us. And what that does is it creates this buffer between the police and the public that shouldn't be there. It's like raising your own children. Now that I have grandchildren, it's a whole different dynamic, because the one thing that kept you from really enjoying your children is fear. All right? You can't do this. You can't do that. You can't do this. With grandchildren, it's unconditional love, because let their parents worry about the fear thing. Well, that's the way it is with police officers. People, they've created this fear, the squeaky wheels that put the cop on the defense. All cops really want to do is go out and embrace the community and help them and talk about what's going on. That would make communities so much stronger, so much more. That's a great crime prevention tool, is just having the cop there and the community together. I wish people would understand that. I just wish that. And we always know the squeaky wheel is going to get the oil, but I think it's time for that to change somewhat.
I think the PBAs across the nation, the FOPs across the nation, need to start speaking out more.
Yes.
I think that's what, and I know you guys certainly do it. I know ours from the city certainly does it.
Patty Lynch is an amazing spokesman.
Just signed an awesome contract, but we'll get into that another time. Again, Bobby, thank you so much. I think it's a great way to end it. Let's do this again sometime. Let's get you and Frank on, and let's talk more about the PBA.
certainly look forward to it.
Awesome. Thanks again, Bobby. Really appreciate it. Again, another episode of the Muscle Room. Hope to see all of you soon. Hope you enjoyed it, and stay tuned for more episodes.